Hi everyone, we're going to go through a bunch of stuff. So you start from your idea. You can consider, do I need to make this or can I just download it? If you have to create it, you can draw it. And in that case, you can scan or photo it. If you can just find it, that's great. But then either way, you're going to get to this step where you have to retouch this raster. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to open up Photoshop. I was playing around with a photo in here earlier. Photoshop's great. Any kind of raster program will work. GIMP is the free one. You can go. I'm going to go ahead and load a selection I made here earlier, just to show in part that you can save them. But here I've selected the faces. The idea in this program is if I only wanted just these faces, then I could use this program to get rid of all this extra stuff before I started my work. So in this case, I have a selection made. I'm going to deselect it and then try to make it again with this quick selection tool, which I find very useful. With all tools in Photoshop, if I use the brackets here on the keyboard, it'll change the brush size, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and try to select this center one again. And this is sort of uses a little bit of AI to sort of guess at what you're selecting. So I have to go ahead and use Option here, or I think it's Alt on PCs. To sort of toggle whether I'm adding or removing from this shape. So if I just wanted that shape, I could then invert the selection, which is under here, but also Command Shift I, and delete everything else. So now I've got my face here, which I could be doing retouching to. I had already kind of blown this out actually earlier while thinking about this lesson. All right, so this is Photoshop, but I'm not primarily here to play with these funny faces today. I want to mess around with this bird. I found this kind of perfect engraving because it has a couple problems, and I want to show how a lot of times, even after you get your scan of your perfect thing, there's a lot of issues. For example, if I go to laser cut, some of these holes here might end up being actual physical holes in my design. You can go ahead first off and just check the resolution of your image here. This has plenty of pixels. If you're at 1500, that's a lot to work with. If it is low resolution, you can still double it or triple it there. It's worth doing, even though you're not really technically adding any resolution. It gives you a little more for some of the effects that you do. So the very first and most basic thing I want to describe is after this one quick step, which is that for what we're doing, in this case, it's all black and white, but we want to make sure we have completely desaturated our image. So image adjustments, desaturate. So yeah, we know we just have black and white here. And I would like to go even further and go into levels, Command L. This is looking pretty extreme, but I'm just going to test by moving around this middle gray point and see if I can maybe knock out a little of those grays. I might bring up a little of the black and try to knock away a little of those grays. Bring down a little of the white. That seems pretty high contrast, and I don't think I lost a lot of data here in this edge, just a little bit, maybe a decent amount, but I think it's worth it. So I'm going to come in and do levels again and just crank up the black just a little bit to try to thicken a little bit of that. Yeah, so now I know I'm dealing with the maximum amount of just black pixels and just white pixels, which is something that laser quite appreciates and understands better. So then in terms of retouching, again, you've got the brackets here to play around with your size. This is your black and white, your foreground and background color, rather, which right now are set to black and white. You can click this default color here to set them to that. So for example, I don't know what the engraving person was doing here in the face. Oh, and I'm using zoom and option to zoom in and out. A Z for zoom, option to toggle whether I'm going in and out. I don't know whoever made this engraving made some funny lines to the mouth here. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to remove them by painting in white. So now you can alternate between the front and back by just toggling X. All right, so we're going to go ahead in here and just remove this here. Now there are ways to do this in Illustrator or vector programs, but I assure you that it is much easier to do here. Now you might be wondering, why are you erasing this stuff? Well, because I'm going to actually try to make a physical bird here. If we were just using an engraving, we wouldn't need to do any of this, right? If we were only going to use this image on top of a rectangle, this is all just sort of a matter of aesthetics. Now, if we're trying to actually cut out this specific bird, which is my goal, then this is a matter of saving yourself a lot of headaches trying to do any of this in a vector environment. That was a little slow there, apologies for that. Okay, so here we've got the rest of this gone. Now I'm just going to check a couple other hotspots here. I'm concerned about this gap. I'm concerned also just given that the image tracing tends to be a little bit picky. Sometimes a little heavy-handedness with any spots that might be too thin. You want to just go ahead and thicken them here. I'm not worried about any internal lines. I'm more worried about external lines. I don't really want to have any gaps anywhere. That's a gap. That's a gap. Now, this is a little precarious here, but honestly, I picked this engraving in part because these are still pretty connected. So we should be nice and thick here for these bird claws. This looks a little bit suspect. This whole section in here is a little rough, but I think this is all fine. I liberally ride the undo key with these things, although also I have to point out that given that this is some 18th century engraving, which is not to knock it, it's just to say it's highly detailed, and at the scale we're at, we're not going to see any of this in the laser. This is mostly just to make sure we don't get stupid glitches, because there's a tiny little gap like right there. Cause a bunch of problems for our design down the road. I'm not saying that's going to be perfect. In fact, I just saw a place that's not. But I think this is getting us, getting us most of the way there for what we want for this bird design. I'm going to go ahead and save it. We're going to go back to Illustrator. So we've retouched it. We didn't have any selections that were made in color. We did get a nice balance of light and dark. In the case of this one, it's really more when you're in levels here with the gray. You might want to, if you find that your engraving turns out a little bit too light, even though it's mostly black and mostly white, the levels will sort of kick up in preference of one or the other. So I might even darken it just a little bit there. All right, I'm going to save that. We're going to go into Illustrator. We're going to create our new document. When you're making a document for laser, try to make sure that it's RGB. I'm going to make sure you can see that. Sorry. Make sure that it's RGB color. Okay, so we're in our new document. We're going to place it. I'm going to replace, here's our stock image. I'm going to go ahead and drag it out onto the gray so we can see if the background disappears. I'm going to make myself some copies. Here's Command D to make a couple more. Okay, I'm going to go into Image Trace and try out some options. This is what my silhouettes looks like. That's a little bit, I don't know, oversimplified. Here's what black and white logo looks like. A little bit better. If I really wanted to keep more of those kind of looks, more of the feather look inside of there, I might have to increase my resolution. I can try shades of gray here. Although if I use anything with grayscale, I will need to eventually turn it into a bitmap if you're using the rabbit lasers. If you really wanted to get more, let's say I really cared about this actually, I'm gonna rewind. Let's say I was pissed. I was like, this is terrible, it's gotta look way better. So then what you do is you go back to Photoshop, and before you leave here, you just make this bigger. Make this like 4,000 pixels instead of 1,500. And now, even though it's the exact same image, when you bring it in here, it's much bigger. So when I go to place this bird, it's going to give me a lot more data. So I'm going to go to black and white logo. And now when I zoom in, I got tons of information. This is excellent. So now we got a nice bird here. Of course, I can't see any of those vectors. That's supposed to be vectors now. That's the whole purpose of image tracing, is to turn a raster into a vector. And here you have to expand it and ungroup it. And then if we did everything right, we should be able to just select just this background and delete it. And it worked. Oh, that's so great. Now, if it didn't, we could go back and fix those things in Photoshop. But I can also show you what the case could be if we had screwed up. So, for example, if I had forgotten to make that this black area connect here, and I deleted the background, that would also remove from it this piece here. And that would have been really frustrating. But what if for whatever reason you don't even have any of this? Let's say we get it, we like it, we've got a great black vector bird, but we have no fill. And yeah, let's say we forgot this one spot. So what I would do is I would go in here and I would use the A key here to drag over a couple anchor points. Just connect my piece. Before actually using Pathfinder here, make sure to go into the options and make sure both of these are selected. Otherwise you're going to get some annoying things happening here. Oops. So I united those to bring that back together. Yeah, so if I wanted to put something in behind this bird, basically to fill in all these areas, what I would do is just draw a simple rectangle. I'd pick some arbitrary color. Oops. Sorry, that's a funny selection method. All right, we'll pick a color. Sometimes if the color doesn't show up, I just select the default and then see if that clears it, which it sometimes does. In this case it's not, and I'm not sure why. Okay, I'm going to put this to the back. Just object arrange on the back. Now if I select both of these, and I really want to make sure, since there's lots of these little pieces here, in fact I might want to be really smart and drag a box over all of this and then group it, object group, just to make sure I'm not letting those things come apart. Now that that's there, I can use this trim feature, which will keep whatever the top thing is and cut out everything behind it. I've ungrouped again. I go in here and delete my extra stuff. But now I've got a full set of vectors. They're not one object, but they do fill the entire area we want. All right, so I'm going to check back in with our. We're going to check back in with our map here. So we did all that. We prepared our raster. That's great. We did all that. We thickened things to account for our material. Last chance to do anything that's easier in raster. Now we're going to create the vector. We did all that. So now we're off the map. So this is a fine transition, but I'm going to take a break. Okay, part 2. I built some more map. So yeah, we've got our bird now. We're going to go ahead and save it. Burb. You might want to save it as Illustrator CS6 just so you can open it on any other Illustrator you might manage to acquire. Okay. So if I've got this bird and this is all I want, then I'm done. I'm not really done, but I'm done with my design. But let's say I wanted it to be something else. So I'm just going to decide that I would like this to be a little standing bird. And so I'm going to make a little rectangle. I'm going to add some anchor points just to give ourselves a couple additional ones in the center. Let's do that again even. Because I want to kind of shape this object based upon those anchor points. Okay, so I think this shape is actually about the right size for our little stand, and we're just going to decide that our material is 1/4 inch. We're going to make ourselves a little 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch rectangle. Now we see the real scale of our bird here. I forgot to do this, which I often do, which is let's decide what our actual size is. In fact, I should put that on the map. All right, so we're just going to decide that we want this to be a little 4-inch bird, in which case this thing is far too large. But we'll make do, because we can just shrink it because it's a vector, because that's awesome. Okay. Now that we're down here, you know, I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking this like maybe should get a little bit rounded over. At least maybe these points could be rounded over somewhat. The other ones we want nice and sharp because they're a base. That's nice. Okay. Now that we have this, this is our 1/4 inch thing. We see that our base needs to be at least big enough to kind of accommodate the scale of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little piece out of this base and create 2 versions of this base. So first we're going to go ahead and align these. We're going to align them in the center and we're going to align them on the top. And I'm going to go ahead and just stretch this so that it fits here. Now, what I've done here is basically set this up so that when I scale it to 50%, just in its height, which, sorry, this is off screen for you guys. Object transform scale. Here it's object transform scale. If we transform it to 50%, just in its height, we know that's half the height of whatever that is. We don't have to look up the measurement. And so we could say that if one of these has this aligned to the bottom, I don't know why it's being so picky about that. When it's being picky, what I do is I drag a little guide from the rulers. Okay. If I've got one with it aligned to the bottom and one with it aligned to the top, then these two should fit together quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of this, hit the divide on the Pathfinder, ungroup it, deselect my 2 pieces and delete the remainder. I'm going to go ahead and remove this guide because I don't need it anymore. Now those are nice 2 pieces that fit together pretty well. Now one of these would have to be fixed to the bird for that to work. Bear in mind that the bird's etched feet are going to be covered up by that. So if that's a big problem to you, you're going to have to fit that until it, you know, looks okay. It'll be somewhat covered up there, but maybe that's good. You know, maybe when you're looking in here, you go like, I realize that this isn't really technically bird, but maybe what I want to do here, it wouldn't be so bad if this was just all filled in. We're not going to worry about it right now. We're going to fix that later. That's got a procrastinate field around it. I think that's pretty good there. So now we're confronted with the fact that this isn't really an object. This is an assembly of objects. And in fact, if I ungroup it and I move this thing away, we can see it's a majillion little things. So I'm going to not ungroup it. Instead, I'm going to copy it. And for now, I'm just going to paste it in front, which is Command F. Also edit, paste in front. Once it's there, I'm going to unify that and just put it all together. And that looks pretty clean. Sometimes when you do this, there's a lot of little stuff on the inside. This is a little bit of a warning sign. I mean, it's just something we maybe missed. Yeah, we missed one little piece. So what I would do here is I continue to have it in front. Oh, and I'm jumping in front and back by Command Shift bracket. You can also object, arrange, bring to front, bring forward, send backwards, send it back. All right, so we've got this piece. We basically want this to be connected with this. So those two are going to get joined together. We're going to give them a whole new color because I want to be able to differentiate from this other color. In fact, this is also going to be this new color. And this color is no longer welcome around here. So the trick is you go in and you just direct select it. So I use my direct selection, so I've got one of these green areas, and then I select the same fill color. And then I hit delete. They're all gone. And now what I've got is I've got this actual object that has these etchings on it. That's a little worrisome. If it actually cuts that out, it's going to be a little bit unhappy. Now, I just cut the etching, but you also have to cut the background, so I maybe should have made that even more differentiated color-wise. But I thought it was just this color, it should be. Okay, yeah. So now that we're here, we don't really have to worry about the etch differently. So I'm going to bring this to the front one more time. And now if I just remove these areas here by direct selecting any part of the path or the anchor and just remove those sections. Actually, I'm not going to remove that one. I'm going to remove that though. Then when we put this to the back, it looks like it's sitting on some little, I don't know, little peg or something. Okay, and maybe on this other one, I wanted to say something. So I'm just going to grab text. I'm going to say tweet. Maybe this person does a bad job of communicating with their friends, so we're going to say tweet more in their case, but I'm going to give it a different font here. Let's see. These I'm going to group together, and these I'm going to group together. So let's check our map. Alright, we define the actual size and the boundary of what is cut, and now we're going to design our laser file. So that we design what we want etched. Okay, we've got that. That's this. This is our etching. We're fine on that. Okay. And then we set any scribe lines. We don't have any of those. We could put some on. I'll do one just for the here. Okay, so what if you were worried that you were going to lose the font for some reason? I would select anything that's still looking like a font and go ahead and say type create outlines. Anything that's a scribe line, you want to give it a 0.1 line weight and make sure that it's a full 255, 0, and 0 here on the RGB scale, full blue. Where we are on the map is right before kerf. Let's see. If it's a rabbit, we can convert that etching to black and white. Bitmap, if it's grayscale, but it's already black, so we're fine. Now we're going to adjust for kerf. And so all you got to do is you got to add something here. So the trick is, if you don't know, add 0.5 line weight. Go up to the stroke, add 0.5 point. And then if you look up close, it's added this little black line. I'm going to give it a different color so that we're not as confused. So it's added this stroke to our object. So we need to go object, path, outline the stroke. And now this stroke, you'll see there's 3 blue lines. If I undo, you see this one. If I do it again, there's 3. That's because now there's a border here. There's an edge. It's an actual fill. So I'm going to eyedropper to make sure that's all that same color. I'm going to unite it, and then I'm going to ungroup it twice because I bet it otherwise would group the 2 backgrounds together. But now these shapes here are a little thicker than what we had before, and if I zoom in, you can see that there's a little part that wouldn't be etched, but the idea is that then the cut line will remove all of this, so the cut line will then burn away just to the edge of that etching. Sometime if your kerf is a little bit too much, you'll see like kind of a halo, and if it's too little, you'll sort of lose your border. So it's kind of a thing you got to test, and if you look on the map, the next thing is you got to test it. And then you got to repeat until that's sweet, and then you design the sheet for minimum laser time. So let's see. For example, if I knew I was going to do 10 of these, then I would make sure that there was a bunch in a line, Oops. Because then when it does the etching side to side, all those black etchings are next to each other, so it's not having to etch the whole way across the sheet, but just in certain areas. So I might tuck them together cleanly. With a complex object, you group it all together and you rotate it 180 degrees, and that usually gives you at least one straight mirror tiling. You can try other fittings from there, but I would recommend using the pair. But then from here you can see that this is great, but it's a little on an angle, so you can rotate the whole group. And if you want to be really picky about it, you group it. You give yourself a bottom anchor point here somewhere. And then you can, with the rotate tool, you hit R, and then Option, and click on your anchor point. It'll let you set whatever you want, but I don't really want it to be a specific number. I just want to grab another point, and if I drag that down to here, that's really flat. And then I can stack these. They'll have a favorite way of going this way, which in this case happens to be a little bit off. But that's about as close as any. Whatever the weird object is, there's some close packing that looks kind of like that. So obviously these ones are in our way. So I'm gonna delete those. Hold down Option. Now I'm doing this transform again. I'm going to unselect these so I can keep transforming those. That's handy. So I didn't get that many. Just gotta get 3 more. I could get 3 more of these in here. Oops. A lot of your sheets are going to end up looking like this. Okay, the glitch. So here's the thing that can happen when you're playing around with Pathfinder. Let's see. In fact, this bird is a great source for this, I think. So I'm going to grab just the etching of this bird, and I'm going to show you an extreme example, but this happens at smaller scales too, so depending on what your work is, this could definitely mess with you. Alright, so this is just the black vectors here for the etch. Now if I'm going to give this filled area its own stroke, it's going to get really crazy. It's going to be pissed. Okay, here we go. This is what we're looking for, are these spikes. So what happens is that the way that it's glitching out a little bit, I kind of clicked too much too quick. Alright. So see these spikes everywhere? It's kind of a cool effect. Here, I'm going to move it to the back. Bottom line, the way that the stroke is being applied to this vector, the way the corners work, they're set to angled right now. Those can kind of cause some of these little spikes, which can show up in your document in a way that's frustrating. And it's going to also round some things off that you might not want rounded if you have really sharp corners, so it's its own problem. But if you really need to get rid of this, you can round over the caps, which are the ends of lines. It's going to take a while to think about that. And then you can round off the corners especially, which is what's going to make these spikes visibly go away. That's handy. So now when I go to outline that stroke, it's a really complicated image, so we might get a different glitch here. Okay, so here's a cool trick. I finally united all that stuff. I like this weird bubbly outline that we did. Just to see it, I'm gonna cut it. And I'm gonna undo through those things, and I'm gonna have to edit this video so you don't have to watch the slow undos, but all right, cool. So I've undone back in time until I've got my original etching. I'm gonna paste in front. So now I've got my thing here. I'm actually gonna send it to the back so we can see it. And now here's bird with bubbly outline. So if I was, say, doing a bird pin, that might be a nice little outline just to give it a little extra oomph. It might not even be enough, depending on the scale you were doing. But you can use that graphically and functionally. Like, as you can see, it helps to unite this little inner area here and strengthen things. Same with the tongue. Depending on the scale, that might be more the look you're going for. And also, that's how you get rid of the glitch. If you're doing those, when you're doing those really thicker lines, that's especially when you see that glitch. So just remember that if you're seeing it, just go into the object. And when you're in the stroke, just make sure that the corners and the caps are rounded over. Yeah, basically, if you have a complex engraving like this and you're trying to build vector shapes from it, inevitably you're going to bump into that glitch. And you might even see it in other programs. And my recommendation is just to remember that what you're really doing is you're adding an outline to a lot of shapes, some of which Illustrator thinks of as curves, and some of which it thinks of as corners. So once it's huge, it doesn't really know the difference, and if it's a corner, it's going to make that corner stick out. You can also play around with this this limit number here. I've had mixed results with that. Your mileage may vary. I think that's basically it. That's a sheet. So that's getting through this basic path. Send you guys a copy of this crazy map. I'll just send you the EPS file, just like a universal vector file. You can play around with it. Although I think this font might be an Adobe font, so apologies for that. It's going to load us some goofy other font. Good luck. Hit up my email if you need help. I think that's it. I think you guys are ready to make some laser stuff. Save your work. Save early, save often. Save copies.